All right, well, today is our first Sunday that Esther and I and the Paydens are out for vacation, and I believe the Browns are out for vacation, and maybe some others have gone on vacation. So I wanted to pick a passage out of the book of James, chapter number 5. So if you can grab your Bible to James chapter 5, we're just going to really look at one verse out of James chapter number 5. James chapter number 5. Get to it there. Okay. And verse number 12. Probably a passage that might be misunderstood by several because of I'd say the cultural context of the word, that one of the words that's actually in the verse. But I'm going to do my best to try to help us understand James 5:12. Look at James 5:12. It says, "But above all things, my brethren, swear not neither by heaven, neither by the earth, neither by any other oath, but let your yea be yea and your nay, nay, lest you fall into condemnation." And this morning's message is focused on this one understanding: stop lying, or as the word is used here in the context, stop swearing. Stop swearing. So we're going to talk about that this morning. Let's pray. Thank you, Lord, for our time here, and we do pray that this will be a blessing to those who are able to see and hear what's said this morning, and I pray that you'll speak to the hearts in Jesus' name. Amen. We live in a culture that is really, you could classify it as really a lying culture. I mean, for the last couple years, it feels like we've really experienced what it looks like to be in a lying culture. I know we've been in it forever, but at least I'd say over the last couple years, we've watched a lot of the things that are said that turn out to not be true, and a lot of things that are pushed upon people that are adamantly lies. You know, being in a fallen world causes people to be filled with lying tongues. Children lie to their parents. Parents lie to their children. Husbands lie to their wives. Wives lie to their husbands. People lie to their employers. Politicians lie to the public to get elected. And even after they get elected, they continue to lie to maintain their office and their power. People lie to the government. Maybe one example, cheating on taxes. That's lying to the government. Teachers lie to their students. Students lie to their teachers. The dog ate my homework, right? Scientists lie, using their credentials and their degrees to really promote things that aren't true. And members of the media lie to the public to propagate an agenda. Our society feels like it's built on lying, dishonesty. And it shouldn't surprise us, because that's what the Bible says about those that are unregenerate, those who are not saved. They come from their father, the devil. And you remember what Jesus said about their father, the devil. John 8:44, he says, "Ye are of your father, the devil, and the lust of your father ye will do." What does he do? He was a murderer from the beginning, abode not in the truth, because there is no truth in him. When he speaketh a lie, he speaketh of his own, for he is a liar and the father of it. Because of mankind's nature to be dishonest, men have been led to impose oaths on others to force them to be truthful when they make promises. We know, and this is sad, but it's true, we know that we can't trust what people say. Think about it when you were children. Did you ever hear someone say, "I swear to God," as a way to get someone to believe what they're saying? Or, "I swear on a stack of Bibles." Or, "Cross my heart and hope to die, stick a needle in my eye." I mean, you hear things like that said. I'm sure when you were a kid heard things like that said, and maybe even as an adult you may have heard stuff like that from time to time. As an adult, that oath promising, oath giving didn't stop. Whenever you get a house, you buy a house and you go and get a loan at a bank, you're forced to sign legal papers that say you're going to pay back the money that you're borrowing from that bank. That's a way of making an oath. Every time you sign a credit card receipt at a restaurant, you're making a promise that you'll pay a debt that you incurred using that card. And if you're called on as a witness in a court of law, you all know this. Put your left hand on the Bible, raise your right hand, and repeat after me. Right? And then you say, "Do you swear to tell the whole truth and nothing but the truth, so help you God?" And it's a promise you're making. When you get married, you may not have realized this, but when you get married, do you realize that you're making an oath, or you're making a vow, a commitment to your mate before God? And there's a reason why there are witnesses there, because they're there to hold you accountable for the promise you made. Until death do you part. Let me read you a famous oath of a master mason, and listen how extreme this oath is. It says this. It says, "Binding myself under no less a penalty than that of having my throat cut, my tongue torn out by its roots, and buried in the rough sands of the sea at low water mark, where the tide ebbs and flows twice in 24 hours, should I ever knowingly or willingly violate this solemn oath, an obligation as a sacred or as an entered apprentice mason, so help me God, and keep me steadfast in the due performance of the same. Binding myself under no less a penalty than that of having my left breast torn open, my heart plucked out and given as a prey to the wild beasts of the field and the fowls of the air, binding myself under no less a penalty than that of having my body severed in twain, my bowels taken from thence and burned to ashes, the ashes scattered to the four winds of heaven, so that no more trace or remembrance many be had of so vile and perjured a wretch as I, should ever knowingly or willingly violate this my solemn obligation as a master mason, so help me God, and help me steadfast in the due performance of the same." That's pretty severe. James is writing here in his letter, and he's writing, if you remember, if you know a little bit of the audience, he's writing to Jewish people. He's writing to Jewish people who identify as followers of Christ. And these Jewish people, if you understand any culture that gets saved, they get saved, and the culture doesn't necessarily disappear the moment you get saved. And so the Jewish culture has been brought in even into this Christian group. And this idea of swearing that James is talking about, or making oaths, was something that was very big in the Jewish culture. And the reason why this oath promising was big in their cultures, because just like I said on the other side of just general understanding of mankind, is that man is accustomed to lying, cheating, not being truthful. And so in the Jewish culture, they had actually reversed it completely and made oath-making sort of a way of cheating even further, where they were making promises that they had no intent on keeping. They would make these gigantic promises, swear upon something as a way of confirming their promise, and then break the promise. Because they would say, well, we're not actually swearing to God, we're swearing upon such and such a thing. So James is going to address that very problem in the church, and he's going to command them to stop swearing. Stop taking oaths with the intent to lie. Stop making promises that you have no intent on keeping. So look what he says in the passage. He says, "But above all things, my brethren." Now, I want to just kind of throw this thought in here just to stop for a moment. But above all things, James puts this command at the top. It's above all things. Throughout the entire book of James, he has given his readers one command after another, and he sets this command, if you will, understanding it this way, as the most important command that he has to give through the entire letter. It's a command that deals with the tongue. And by the way, this isn't the first time, if you're familiar with the book of James, that he's addressed the topic of the tongue. In fact, every single chapter he's addressed the issue of the tongue. Go back and look at James 1:26. You'll just see. It says, "If any man among you seem to be religious and bridleth not his tongue, but deceiveth his own heart, this man's religion is vain." And here James is talking about the fact that the tongue actually marks out whether a person's faith is genuine or false. Meaning that if they claim to have a faith, but their tongue is out of control, their faith is vain, empty. Wow. You saying your faith's going to affect the way you speak? James 2:12, it says, "So speak ye and so do, as they that be judged by the law of liberty." In other words, this verse, James is saying, your words give evidence of your spiritual liberation. Chapter 3, we are given a lengthy discourse on the tongue, and he describes the tongue as being like a fire that sets everything ablaze. And then in chapter 4, verse 11, he says this, "Speak not evil one of another, brethren. He that speaketh evil of his brother and judgeth his brother speaketh evil of the law and judgeth the law." And here he says, when you tear other people down with your tongue, you indirectly tear down God's law, and ultimately you tear down the lawgiver, God himself. And now we come to chapter 5, verse 12, and once again, James is cycling back around to deal with the issue of the tongue, and in this instance, he puts a preeminence on the command, as though it's the most important command that he is giving them, throughout the entire letter. Don't miss this command. The speech here has to do with honest speech. Above all things, God expects his people to be categorized as honest people. Not being caught up with the kind of the culture that the old man lives in, the unregenerate man lives in, where you can fudge the truth, where you can tell little white lies, where you don't have to keep your word, where you don't have to keep your promises, where you can even make promises to God just to get someone to believe you, but you don't ever really keep them. James is saying you're not to be like that culture. God's people are to be categorized as people of truth. This command is important. It's important. Now let's look at the restriction of this command. Look what he says again down in verse 12. He says, "Swear not neither by heaven, neither by earth, neither by any other oath." Now, again, as I've already pointed out in the introduction here, when James is talking about swearing, he's not talking about telling dirty jokes. He's not talking about filthy puns or four-letter words or gross profane words or profanity, as we say it. He's not addressing that issue at all. Now, that doesn't mean that James wouldn't have anything to say about it, or he's giving a pass on bad talk or filthy talk, because the Bible does deal with that. The Bible does tell us that we're not to have our tongues filled with corrupt communication, meaning filthy talk. Shouldn't be using four-letter words, at least filth words, as a believer. Should have no part of that. Filthy talk as a Christian is really a contradiction. The swearing here that James is talking about has to do with oaths. People used oaths to bind and strengthen their words, right? They would make a promise, or they would say something is happening, or say something would happen, and they would bind themselves to something greater than themselves as a way to give greater assurance to what they're saying. Bind themselves to a higher authority. You could sort of say it this way: swearing or making oaths from the Jewish perspective had three distinct qualities to it, three distinct results. One, to attest to the truth. Yes, this is true. What I am saying is true. Connect myself to God as a way of assuring you that I'm saying this is true. Also, it was calling on God to attest to that truth. God knows truth from lie. God knows everything. There's nothing that He misses. And if I put my name or my words connected to God, my promises connected to God, and say I'm telling the truth, God knows it, it's a way of assuring us. And then third, swearing also has a way of invoking God's wrath upon the one who may or may not be telling the truth. Because if they aren't telling the truth, God knows, and God also will vindicate it. Now, let me give you a little background on the idea of swearing. In those days, people didn't have written up contracts like we do, where they said they make a promise that they're going to do something and they'd keep their word. They didn't use legal courts to enforce people to keep their word like we do today. And so if a person is going to do something and he wanted someone else to believe that he would keep his word, he would appeal to God or something greater than himself. I swear to God that I will do what I say, and if I don't, may God strike me dead. Something along those lines. It was a solemn thing to make an oath before God that you would keep your word. James, his command is not a command that's telling us to never make promises. That's not at all what he's dealing with. It's not a command to never make promises or to never invoke God's name when it comes to a vow or an oath that you're making. In fact, if you were to go back into the Old Testament, God never commanded His people that they were not to swear. He never did that. He only said that they were not to use His name in a vain way. That's the third commandment, right? You're not to take the name of the Lord your God in vain. That means in a fraudulent way. You are not to use God's name to lie. Abraham, in Genesis 24, verses 2 and 3, says that he swore to God that he would keep his word. In Isaac, we see swearing to God. Isaac, in Genesis 26 through 31, we see him swearing to God. We see Jacob swearing, Genesis 31, verse 44 to 50. We see in 2 Samuel 19:23, we see David swearing to God. 2 Chronicles 15, 14 and 15, you see the whole nation of Israel coming together and swearing to God. In Nehemiah 10:29, you see Nehemiah leading all the people to make a vow to God, even calling them to swear. You even see in the Old Testament where you see God's people being sworn to by God. And where we see God Himself calling them to swear to Him. Exodus 22:10 and 11, it says, if a man deliver unto his neighbor an ass or an ox or a sheep or any beast to keep, and it die, or be hurt, or driven away, no man seeing it, then shall an oath of the Lord be between them both, that he hath not put his hand unto his neighbor's good. Did you hear that? An oath of the Lord be between them both. That's commanded in the law of God. That if there is a discrepancy, if there's a concern about whether somebody stole something or whether somebody has abused somebody, they were to make an oath before God to one another. Numbers 5:19, it says this about if a woman is being brought with the question of being an adulteress to her husband, she was brought before the priest, and the priest would force her to make an oath before the Lord. Listen to this, Numbers 5:19, it says, the priest shall charge her by an oath, and say unto the woman, if no man have lain with thee, and if thou hast not gone aside to uncleanness with another instead of thy husband, be thou free from the bitter water that causeth the curse. And so here he's saying that she is to make an oath testifying to her innocence before God. And if she's lying before God, God will punish her. We see in Deuteronomy 6:13 where God commands His people to swear by His name. Listen to this. He says, thou shalt fear the Lord thy God and serve Him, and listen to this, and shalt swear by His name. Now, it wasn't something they were doing all the time, but what God is saying here is that when you are in need of making a promise or making an oath, don't go and promise somewhere else. Don't go and promise on someone else. Promise upon my name, because I will hold you accountable. In Numbers 30, we see God telling His people this. He says, Numbers 30, verse 2, He says, if a man vow a vow unto the Lord, or swear an oath to bind his soul with a bond, he shall not break his word. He shall do according to all that proceedeth out of his mouth. Now, you don't see God saying, don't ever swear by my name. What God is saying is that when you do swear, using my name to make a promise, you keep that promise. You don't take my name in vain. You don't throw my name around flippantly in a way that dishonors me. And even in the Old Testament, we see God making oaths to men in which He swears upon His own name. This is out of Hebrews, but it's a reference to Genesis, where God is talking to Abraham. But listen to this, Hebrews 6:13, it says, for when God made promise to Abraham, because He could swear by no greater, He sware by Himself, saying, surely blessing I will bless thee, and multiplying I will multiply thee. Now, why would God ever need to swear? I mean, isn't He trustworthy? Is He capable of lying to men? The answer is obvious, right? No. So what God was doing was, in a sense, bringing Himself down to the level of sinful man and making a promise on His own name that He would bless Abraham as He promised He would do. And He's saying, if I don't keep my word, my own name is run through the dirt by myself. In Acts 2, Peter refers to God making an oath to David. In Genesis 9, we see God making an oath before Noah and all the creation that He'd never flood the earth again by a flood. In Luke 1, we see Him taking an oath saying that He would send a Redeemer. In Psalm 16, verse 10, we see God giving an oath to raise His Son from the dead. In Isaiah 49, God is making a promise that He will preserve the nation of Israel. And when you get into the New Testament, you see people still taking oaths before God or making oaths before God. You see Paul doing it. You even see Jesus doing it. Now here's the question that comes up. If God commands His people to swear by His name in the Old Testament, and even in the New Testament we see His people swearing by His name, then what is James referring to in this passage? What kind of swearing is he commanding them to not be doing? Well, here's what the forbidden swearing is, and I want to see if you can catch it. Look back at the passage. He says, "Swear not, neither by heaven, neither by the earth, neither by any other oath." Those who are familiar maybe with some of the things that Jesus said in the Sermon on the Mount, specifically about swearing in the Sermon on the Mount, might recognize what James is referring to. It might even seem very similar to what he's saying. Did anybody notice the missing phrase? The missing phrase, "Swear not, neither by heaven, neither by earth, neither by any other oath." What did James leave out in the command? Yeah, he left out "in the name of the Lord" or "on the name of the Lord." James is not telling them to never swear, but rather he's telling them that there needs to be a type of swearing that they should never do. Now, to understand what he's talking about here when he says neither by heaven, neither by earth, neither by any other oath, let's look a little further in the context. In the context, if we could take it back and look at Jesus' rebuke in the Sermon on the Mount, it might make a little more sense in parallel to what Jesus is saying, to what James is saying. Now listen to what he says in Matthew 5:33. This is Jesus in the Sermon on the Mount. He says, "Again, ye have heard that it hath been said by them of old time, Thou shalt not forswear thyself, but shalt perform unto the Lord thine oaths. But I say unto you, swear not at all, neither by heaven, for it is God's throne, nor by the earth, for it is His footstool, neither by Jerusalem, for it is the city of the great King. Neither shalt thou swear by thy head, because thou canst not make one hair white or black, but let your communication be yea, yea, nay, nay, for whatsoever is more than these cometh of evil." Now Jesus here was dealing with something that the Jews had come up with that helped them to not keep their word. See, swearing was set up as a way to secure that they would keep their word, but they learned how to manipulate that even to the point that they could further hold on to their lies. And they said to themselves something like this: if we swear upon the name of the Lord, He's going to hold us accountable for what we say. But if we don't mention His name in our oath, He can't hold us accountable because we didn't swear upon Him. So they started swearing by heaven, or swearing by earth, or swearing by Jerusalem, or swearing upon their own head. That's what Jesus is referring to here. And so then in Matthew 23, we see Jesus again dealing with this kind of false swearing. Listen to this, Matthew 23:16 through 22. He says, "Woe unto you, ye blind guides, which say, Whosoever shall swear by the temple, it is nothing. But whosoever shall swear by the gold of the temple, he is debtor. Ye fools and blind, for whether is greater, the gold or the temple that sanctifieth the gold? And whosoever shall swear by the altar, it is nothing. But whosoever sweareth by the gift that is upon it, he is guilty. Ye fools and blind, for whether is greater, the gift or the altar that sanctifieth the gift? Whoso therefore shall swear by the altar, sweareth by it, and by all things thereon. And whoso shall swear by the temple, sweareth by it, and by Him that dwelleth therein. And he that shall swear by heaven, sweareth by the throne of God, and by Him that sitteth thereon." So here's what he's saying is, they completely misunderstood the idea. Because they were saying that if you swear by the temple, you're not in debt, because God isn't going to hold you to keep your vow because you didn't swear upon Him. But if you swear by the gold, sort of like they somehow elevated the gold as being greater than the temple, then you are going to be held accountable. If you swear by the altar, he's saying, but don't swear by the gift, you're free. But if you swear by the gift, which is the sacrifice on top of the altar, he says, then you're going to be bound to your oath. And Jesus is basically saying, it doesn't matter where you swear upon. It doesn't matter what you swear upon. When you make an oath on anything, it's connected to God. Why? Because He made all things. And all things belong to Him. And if you take something that belongs to Him and swear upon it, you're ultimately swearing upon Him. You take heaven and swear upon it, you're swearing upon what belongs to God. You take the earth, you're swearing upon something that belongs to God. You take Jerusalem, you are swearing upon something that belongs to God. You take yourself and swear upon yourself. You are taking something that belongs to God. You swear upon the altar, you swear upon the sacrifice, you swear upon the temple, you swear upon the gold of the temple. All of it belongs to God. It doesn't matter what you put to the oath to tie your name to the oath, because ultimately you are swearing to God. You can't make a promise. You can't make a promise that God is not going to hold you accountable for. That's what he's saying. Wow. It's pretty strong. You think about how many times you've made promises and didn't keep your promise. Or how many times you said something that you knew wasn't a truth and deceived people. Think about phrases and things that people say today to try to make people believe. Cross my heart, right? Or they'll say to get themselves out from it, they'll say, I had my fingers crossed. I know that's baloney, but that's the idea. It's the same concept. So what James's command here is not just don't ever make a promise. Really, I don't think that's even possible fully, because there's going to be times you have to. But the point he's making here is don't bring false oaths into your conversations. Don't bring that Jewish garbage that the Jewish culture has devised to be deceptive to one another. It's unacceptable among God's people. Just because you're Jewish doesn't mean you have the right to do that. Not now, as a believer. As believers, we're to be people of the truth. Now look further at the instruction. Go down and look again in verse 12. He says, but let your yea be yea and your nay, nay. And again, this really does parallel what Jesus said. Let your yea be yea and your nay be nay. Now this is the flip side of dishonest promises. Obviously, right? It's the flip side. Instead of lying, tell the truth. Let your yea or your yeses be yea or yes. And let your nay or your no's be no. If you say yes, mean it. And if you say no, you need to mean no. It's that simple. God's people should be so characterized by honesty that when they say yes, that they are going to do something, or yes to something that has happened, then they are fully expected to do so, or fully trusted that it really did happen. Because they're people of the truth. And when they say no, they have not done this, or no, they will not do this, we should believe it. God's people are to be characterized by truth. Ephesians 4:25, listen to this. It says, wherefore, putting away lying, speak every man truth with his neighbor, for we are members one of another. And then again in Matthew 5:37, where Jesus is addressing this very concept that James is talking about, he says, but let your communication be yea, yea, nay, nay. For whatsoever is more than these cometh of evil. If you have to add conditions to your promises, then it's coming out of an evil heart. Because you should be people that are characterized as truthful people. Truthful people. Now, he gives a motivation behind the command. And I'm just going to tell you, this motivation's not pleasant. Look what he says in verse 12. He says, lest ye fall into condemnation. Now, the motivation here, James is, if you understand the purpose of the book of James, James is talking about what true faith looks like. What true saving faith looks like. And there are characteristics of true saving faith and characteristics of false professions. And the warning here he gives is a warning of condemnation. The condemnation James is talking about here is not of a warning about the believer's chastisement, as though, if you're caught telling a lie, God's children are going to get whipped by God, like we understand chastisement to be. But the word here for condemnation is the word krisis in the Greek. It's the word we get, English word for crisis. And in every place that this word is used in the New Testament, it is used to describe the idea of a judge passing sentence upon a criminal. Hear that? In James 2:13, James uses it to describe God mercilessly sending some sinner to hell who showed no mercy to others. In the Gospels, it is used 25 times with the idea of passing sentence upon a criminal. In Acts 8:33, it is used to describe Christ's judgment at Pilate's hands. Paul used it twice to speak of God's judgment of sinners, 2 Thessalonians 5:1 and 1 Timothy 5:24. Peter used it to describe the day of God's judgment upon sinners, 2 Peter 2:9. So did Jude in verses 6 and verse 15 of Jude. And so did John in 1 John 4:17. So what James is describing, get this, is not the believer being chastened for the sin of lying, but rather the one who professes to belong to Christ, yet consistently characterized by a lying tongue, being condemned to hell forever. That's the idea. Being brought before a judge and sentenced to eternal damnation. See, the point he's making, it's not enough to claim that you belong to Christ to be a Christian. A person who is a genuine Christian will have genuine identification marks. And one of those marks that they have is that they are people of the truth. People of the truth. They keep their word even if it means to their own hurt. But the Scripture also warns, get this, boy, this is convicting, also warns that those whose tongues are categorically characterized by lying, they have their end as well. Listen what he says, and I'm just going to give you a few out of Revelation here. Revelation 21:7 and 8, it says, "He that overcometh shall inherit all things, and I will be his God, and he shall be my son. But the fearful and unbelieving and abominable, the murderers and whoremongers and sorcerers and idolaters and all liars shall have their part in the lake which burneth with fire and brimstone, which is the second death." All liars are going to go to hell, is what he's saying. Revelation 21:27, he says, "And there shall in no wise enter into it anything that defileth, neither whatsoever worketh abomination or maketh a lie, but they that are written in the Lamb's book of life." Did you see the contrast? The ones that don't enter into the kingdom of God, the ones that don't enter into the holy city, are people who make lies with all those other groups of people. And then one more, Revelation 22:15. Again, describing those that are on the outside of the city. He says this, "For without are dogs and sorcerers and whoremongers and murderers and idolaters, and whosoever loveth and maketh a lie." Liars won't enter into the kingdom of God, but their eternal destination is the pit of hell. That's what he's saying. So the motivation, James is saying, you better get rid of this lying tongue. You better not let that culture slip into Christianity, that culture that you came out of where you just make these false promises so you can lie your way around to whatever you want with people. You better halt that now, because this is not what characterizes those that are God's people. And if your life is one of being a lying tongue, where you continually have this lying tongue, it's a good indication you never came to the place in which you were truly made right with God. You're just professing something that doesn't really belong to you. Does anybody remember back in Exodus chapter number 20? Let me end it with this. Exodus chapter number 20, where we see the first mention, the Ten Commandments. It's mentioned a few times in the Old Testament, but here in Exodus chapter 20, listen to what God says about swearing or using God's name and what He says will happen. Look at this, Exodus 20, verse 7. He says, "Thou shalt not take the name of the Lord thy God in vain." Listen to this next part. "For the Lord will not hold him guiltless that taketh his name in vain." What's that mean? If you're going to be a liar, and make it even worse than just being a liar, attach God's name to your lies, God's not going to let you off the hook. This is not the characteristic of a believer, but rather the characteristic of one that's going to face the eternal wrath of God. So the motivation, if you want to understand it from this perspective of why we are not people that do that kind of stuff, is because there's coming a judgment for those who do it. And we are not them of the darkness, them of lying tongues. Let's pray. Thank you, Lord, for our passage that we studied here this morning. Pray that you'll use it to challenge us, to consider where we are at with you, in our relationship with you. Also, maybe just to challenge us to be on guard about having a lying tongue, whether it be making these grandiose promises that we know are not true, just to deceive, or telling little white lies, or exaggerating things, without just being honest people. I pray, Lord, that you'll help us to be people of the truth, to love your word, to honor you, to exalt the name of Christ, to have such a testimony about us as believers that whatever we say, yes, it is understood to mean yes, or no, it is understood to mean no, that nobody doubts our truthfulness. Pray, Lord, that you'll help us to love you and to love your word and apply it to our life. Thank you for everybody that made it here this morning. In Jesus' name, amen.